Have you ever wondered how someone could have everything the world admires? Wealth, fame, power, and then simply vanish. One day their name moves markets, the next it's a whisper in an empty room. It seems impossible that something so vast, so visible, could just fade. But money has always been a strange illusion. We think of it as solid, bank accounts, skyscrapers, numbers carved in stone. Yet the story of wealth is more like a river than a rock. It flows through time, changes shape, and sometimes disappears altogether. In our imagination, billionaires live above the clouds. We picture private jets and rare art, not silence or absence. But across the world, fortunes have dissolved, and those who once ruled the skyline have quietly slipped out of sight. This journey begins not in busy stock exchanges, but in quiet spaces. Think of a mountain trail covered in snow, a wide ocean under a storm, or a crowded street where a person once greeted fans and now walks alone. In each of these places, someone with extraordinary wealth disappeared. The world wrote about them, speculated and searched. Governments got involved, families waited in silence, and rumors filled the gaps. What happened to those fortunes when the owners disappeared? Why do some people step away from the spotlight willingly, while others are pushed by unseen forces? Across 15 chapters, we will explore the hidden stories of disappearing billionaires. Some vanish because of politics and others because of personal choices. Some lose everything in a moment, and others give it away deliberately. Along the way, we will meet bankers, entrepreneurs, sailors, skiers, and philanthropists. We will think about how money can be as fragile as a snowflake and as heavy as a ship. We will see how power can protect and trap, and how freedom can be gained by walking away. This series does not chase scandal for its own sake. It offers a calm and reflective look at the intersection of wealth and humanity, where ambition meets silence and success meets its shadow. Each story opens a window into timeless questions: who truly owns wealth, who controls it, and what happens when it slips beyond reach. If you stay with this journey, you won't just learn about vanished fortunes. You'll begin to see money itself differently. You'll understand how it shapes identity, freedom, and even our sense of existence. This is not an ordinary documentary. It's a quiet exploration of power and impermanence, an invitation to look beneath the surface of success and into the human heart. If this kind of reflection speaks to you, consider subscribing, not for headlines or hype, but for insight, calm, and stories that stay with you long after they end. And so, we begin with the first shadow, the moment when great wealth meets the mystery of disappearance. Chapter 1: The Crackdown. The story begins in a modern city filled with skyscrapers, neon lights, and a promise of endless growth. In recent decades, China built an economy that dazzled the world. Private companies rose from humble beginnings to become global giants. Their founders were celebrated as symbols of possibility. At the height of their success, some were as famous as movie stars. They gave speeches, built philanthropic projects, and enjoyed public admiration. Then a new era arrived. The government decided that the private sector needed to fall in line with the party's vision. One by one, the brightest lights began to flicker. Imagine being the founder of a major property company. You have spent years taking loans, building towers, and selling apartments to a growing middle class. Your company holds billions in assets and liabilities. You are known as the king of real estate. Then one day state media reports that you are being investigated. Your face disappears from public events. People whisper that you were taken away for questioning. This is not a crime story in the traditional sense. It is a political story. In China, the Communist Party exercises tight control over business. When leaders believe someone poses a threat, they act. Hui Ka-yan, the founder of China's largest property developer Evergrande, experienced such a change. Evergrande amassed enormous debt as it tried to build across the nation. Reports say the company's liabilities reached around $300 billion and set off alarms. When the government decided that the housing market needed to cool and that speculation should be curbed, companies like Evergrande were squeezed. Hui Ka-yan, once celebrated as an example of rags to riches, became the subject of investigations. He reportedly faced measures that limited his ability to travel. Investors watched as the value of their holdings tumbled. The man who symbolized the rise of private wealth in China became a lesson in its fragility. Hui was not alone. A pattern of disappearances emerged. Bao Fan, a well-known investment banker and founder of China Renaissance Holdings, vanished for months. His company told investors that he was cooperating in an investigation. Dajun, chairman of Season Holdings, went missing for a period amid reports of financial irregularities. Ren Zhiqiang, a property executive known for criticizing government policies, disappeared after publicly challenging leadership. He was later sentenced to prison for corruption. Yang Zhihui of Landing International Development vanished briefly when he was linked to investigations. Yi Jianming of CEFC China Energy, Wu Xiaohui of Anbang Insurance, Zhao Jianhua of Tomorrow Holdings, and Yim Feng of Guotai Junan all fell from view. Each case carried its own details. Some of the men returned to public life after cooperating, while others faced long prison terms. What united them was the sense of uncertainty. The government did not always announce charges. Stock prices plunged when a leader's absence became public. Employees were left to guess whether their jobs were secure. The families of the executives often remained silent, knowing that speaking out could bring further trouble. Rumors filled the gaps. Some said that people had been taken to secret facilities. Others claimed that they were hiding abroad. The truth was often hidden behind official statements. These disappearances reveal a deeper message. Wealth in China is not independent from politics. Entrepreneurs may create jobs and wealth, but they remain under the watchful eye of the party. When their power grows too large, or when they criticize policies, they face risks that can make their fortunes vanish overnight. The party's message is that private power must serve national goals. In a single-party state, political loyalty is a condition for business success. The crackdown is not just about law enforcement. It is also about aligning economic actors with political authority. For ordinary citizens watching from afar, the stories evoke mixed feelings. On one hand, there is sympathy for people who built companies and then were swept away by opaque forces. On the other hand, there is frustration at reports of corruption and the damage these companies cause to the economy. Evergrande's financial troubles hurt suppliers, workers, and homebuyers. The crackdown could be seen as an attempt to address systemic problems. It also serves as a warning to other business leaders not to cross the political line. People ask whether such actions could happen in their own countries and what safeguards exist to protect the rule of law. As we move forward, the weight of fortune begins to feel lighter. A billion-dollar empire can hang on the decisions of a few officials. A life spent climbing the ladder can be undone by a single misstep or by being on the wrong side of a policy change. These stories ask us to reflect on the nature of wealth. Is it truly yours if someone else can take it away without explanation? Is it a privilege that comes with obligations? The Crackdown chapter invites us to hold these questions as we travel to other places where fortunes disappear in different ways. The roots of this tension between private wealth and state power go back further. In the early decades of the People's Republic, private enterprise was virtually non-existent. The state controlled production, and those who accumulated wealth were often labeled as enemies. During the Cultural Revolution, people who were seen as capitalists were publicly humiliated and sometimes imprisoned. As China opened up in the late 1970s, entrepreneurs were allowed to emerge, but always with an understanding that the party remained supreme. This historical memory influences how the government and society view today's tycoons. They are tolerated and sometimes celebrated, but they are also reminded of past campaigns against private wealth. Another notable figure who faced scrutiny is tech billionaire Jack Ma. Known for founding Alibaba and Ant Group, Ma was an outspoken and charismatic leader. His comments at a financial forum criticizing regulators in 2020 led to swift repercussions. The record-setting initial public offering of Ant Group was halted. Ma disappeared from the public eye for months. When he resurfaced, his tone was more subdued. He focused on education and philanthropy rather than challenging authorities. His experience reinforced the message that even the most successful entrepreneurs must tread carefully. The price of nonconformity can include being sidelined or forced to reshuffle business plans. It is also important to recognize that the crackdown has wider social support. Many ordinary citizens are frustrated with soaring housing prices and corporate excess. They welcome efforts to rein in speculation and corruption. The disappearances of certain executives are seen as overdue accountability. This does not eliminate concerns about due process or transparency, but it adds complexity to the narrative. The crackdown is not simply a top-down imposition. It also responds to genuine social grievances. For the entrepreneurs caught in the middle, navigating these currents requires skill and humility. Their stories remind us that building wealth in a system where rules can change overnight demands more than business acumen. It requires an awareness of history and the ability to adapt to shifting political winds. Chapter 2: Shadows on the Sea. The sea has always been a place of mystery. Its surface can look calm and inviting one moment and deadly the next. For people with means, the ocean offers escape and freedom. Luxury yachts carry their owners to hidden coves, sunny islands, and quiet corners where the cares of the world seem far away. Yet even on the finest vessels, nature holds the upper hand. Two stories, decades apart, show how the sea can sweep away lives and fortunes without warning. In the summer of 2024, a sleek yacht named the Billionaire glided through the waters near Sicily. The 184-foot vessel belonged to Mike Lynch, a British entrepreneur known for co-founding a software company. He was called Britain's Bill Gates by some for his role in the early days of technology. The trip was meant to be a celebration. Lynch and his guests had gathered on board after he was acquitted in a legal case in the United States. Laughter and music floated into the warm air. Then the sky darkened. A waterspout, a column of swirling wind and water, formed quickly. It crashed into the yacht with tremendous force. Within moments the vessel began to list. Panic rose as the crew and guests scrambled for life rafts. Rescue boats arrived as the yacht sank. Reports said more than 20 people were on board. Some clung to debris. Lynch's wife survived, but several people, including his daughter, were missing. News of the disaster spread across the world. In the days that followed, authorities found the bodies of 7 people, including Lynch himself. His daughter was not found. It was a tragic end to a life that had seen both great success and legal battles. In the aftermath, people asked why the yacht was in the path of a storm and whether more could have been done to protect those on board. There were no simple answers. The sea had reminded everyone of its unpredictable power. More than 3 decades earlier, another shipwreck captured global attention. In November 1991, the world woke to the news that Robert Maxwell, a powerful media baron, was dead. Maxwell owned a vast publishing empire, including newspapers in Britain and America. He was a towering figure, both physically and in business. His yacht, the Lady Ghislaine, was named after his daughter. Maxwell had anchored near the Canary Islands for a short break. In the early hours, he was last seen alive. By morning, he was gone. His body was later found floating in the sea. He had either fallen, jumped, or been pushed from his yacht. Maxwell's death set off a chain of revelations. It turned out that his companies were deeply in debt. He had borrowed from pension funds and hidden financial problems. The empire he built was a house of cards. Some speculated that he took his own life to avoid facing the collapse. Others whispered darker theories. His son and daughter later tried to keep parts of the business together, but the damage was too great. Employees learned that their pensions had been raided. The public's image of the billionaire as a fearless entrepreneur gave way to a more complex picture. He was both a visionary and a man who took reckless risks. Though the stories of Lynch and Maxwell are different, they share common threads. Both men were at the center of immense wealth. Both found some freedom at sea. Both met the end of their public stories in the water. Their deaths remind us that money cannot control the elements. A storm does not care if you are a billionaire. A wave will not spare you because you have built skyscrapers or software. Nature's laws are bigger than human wealth. This awareness can be humbling, whether one has millions or nothing. The aftermath of these maritime tragedies also shows how fortunes can vanish quickly. In the case of Lynch, the value of his estate will depend on legal cases and claims. The sudden loss of life complicates the transfer of assets. In Maxwell's case, his death accelerated the unraveling of an empire built on borrowed funds. It revealed the fragility of businesses that appear unassailable. Investors and employees who thought their futures were secure learned otherwise. In both stories, the survivors had to navigate grief while also managing financial chaos. For viewers and listeners, these tales may seem far removed from daily life, yet they touch on universal themes. We all seek control and safety. We all hope our plans will endure. The ocean's unpredictability mirrors the uncertainty of our lives. A calm sea can change into a storm without warning. a booming business can struggle due to factors outside anyone's control. Recognizing this can foster empathy. The very wealth that isolates people can also isolate them from common experiences. When tragedy strikes, the material differences fade, and the shared human vulnerability emerges. These stories also remind us that wealth often carries hidden burdens. Having a luxurious yacht means making decisions about routes, crews, and safety. Being at the helm of a media empire means balancing ambition with responsibility. When mistakes happen, the consequences can be magnified. In our reflection, we should resist the temptation to cast blame quickly. Instead, we can see these events as reminders that all human endeavors are subject to the same unpredictability. Whether one is steering a small boat or a superyacht, caution and humility are vital. At the end of this chapter, we can picture the empty decks of the Bayesian and the Lady Ghislaine. The polished wood and shining metal are now underwater. The laughter and conversations have been replaced by the sound of waves. For the families and friends of those who were lost, the sea holds memories that are both beautiful and painful. As we move to the next story, the image of the horizon remains. It invites us to look beyond the obvious and to see the quiet lessons hidden within the headlines. In the wake of the Bayesian disaster, rescue teams worked through the night. Divers braved dangerous conditions to search the submerged decks. Helicopters hovered overhead, scanning the choppy waters for survivors. Families gathered on shore, waiting for news. The image of a powerful man reduced to a victim of nature underscored the fragility of human plans. News reports described Lynch's last messages to loved ones, emphasizing the normalcy of the moments before the storm hit. These details made the tragedy feel personal. They also sparked discussions about maritime safety and climate change. As weather patterns become more erratic, even well-equipped vessels may face unforeseen hazards. The story of Robert Maxwell's death has likewise inspired books, films, and countless theories. Some authors argue that Maxwell was murdered by intelligence agencies. Others suggest he jumped to avoid financial ruin. The absence of definitive answers keeps the story alive. It also illustrates how the deaths of the powerful can become mythologized. In the decades since Maxwell's fall, other maritime tragedies have struck wealthy travelers. Airplanes owned by celebrities have crashed. Fishing trips have ended in disaster. Each time, the public responds with a mix of sympathy and curiosity. We look for lessons about safety and hubris. We also confront our own mortality. On a deeper level, these stories remind us that the ocean is not just a setting but a character. It has moods and tempers. It demands respect. Sailors and seafarers throughout history have personified the sea, praying to it and telling stories about its power. When billionaires disappear at sea, the narrative taps into ancient themes. We are reminded of Odysseus battling storms, of sailors lost at Cape Horn. These myths persist because they speak to an enduring truth. No matter how advanced our technology, we remain small in the face of nature's forces. Chapter 3: The Fall from Grace. The collapse of a fortune can feel like the collapse of a temple. People who have grown used to working inside a mighty structure wake one day to find cracks in the walls. They look up and see parts of the roof falling. The fall from grace may begin with a small mistake or a single lie. Over time, it grows into a pattern that cannot be hidden. Robert Maxwell's empire was one such structure. built on publishing and powered by ambition, it seemed solid, yet hidden within were weaknesses that would bring it down. To understand the fall, we must return to the early days of Maxwell's career. Born in Czechoslovakia and raised in a poor family, he fought in World War II and later entered business. He bought and sold companies, eventually building a media group. His newspapers reached millions of readers. Politicians courted him, and he moved among world leaders. People admired his determination and his ability to reinvent himself, but behind the headlines there were warning signs. Maxwell borrowed heavily to finance his acquisitions. He treated pension funds as if they were his own. He moved money between companies to cover gaps. These actions created an illusion of strength. By the early 1990s, the cracks had widened. Maxwell's empire was burdened by debt. Interest payments ate into profits. He continued to spend on yachts and homes to maintain his image. Employees trusted him with their retirement savings, not knowing that those funds were being used to prop up failing businesses. When Maxwell fell from his yacht and died, the truth surfaced. Investigators discovered that hundreds of millions of pounds were missing from pension funds. Thousands of workers faced uncertain futures. The press called it a scandal. Maxwell went from hero to villain in the eyes of many. This story is a cautionary tale about transparency and accountability. The public often sees only the glamorous parts of wealth, the parties, the charities, the grand statements. We rarely see the loans taken to support those displays. Maxwell used his status to hide financial mismanagement. It took his death to expose the extent of the problem. The collapse was not just about numbers, it was about trust. Employees felt betrayed. Readers who had admired his boldness now felt misled. The price of maintaining an image was paid by those who had believed in him. Other business leaders have faced similar falls. Some built large companies based on innovation, only to watch them crumble due to fraud or misjudgment. When a company collapses, the founders often lose not only their wealth but also their reputation. Their names are linked to failure. The fall can be especially hard for people who tied their identity to their business. Without the company, they struggle to know who they are. The public, who once celebrated them, may turn away or even cheer the downfall. This change in perception can be as painful as the financial loss. The fall from grace can also be a slow process. It may begin with a decline in sales, a new competitor, or a change in consumer behavior. Leaders might try to adapt, but their efforts fail. Pride can prevent them from seeking help. Instead of making tough cuts, they borrow more. Instead of changing direction, they double down on past strategies. This can turn a difficult situation into a disaster. By the time they admit the problem, it may be too late. The company falls, and with it, the founder's dream. It is important to remember that not every fall is a result of wrongdoing. Sometimes external factors cause businesses to fail. A global financial crisis can reduce demand. A pandemic can shut down supply chains. Technology can make products obsolete. When these events occur, even well-run companies can struggle. Founders and employees may lose their livelihoods through no fault of their own. In such cases, the fall from grace is a collective experience. Communities may rally to support those affected, or they may be too overwhelmed by their own challenges to help. When we read about these collapses, we can feel a mix of emotions. There is sadness for the workers who lose pensions and jobs. There is also a sense of justice when someone who abused trust faces consequences. These feelings remind us that money is deeply connected to morality. We expect leaders to act responsibly. When they do not, we react strongly. The scale of a billionaire's fall does not make it less human. It simply magnifies the effects. As we close this chapter, let us hold on to the lessons it offers. Wealth built on weak foundations is unstable. Transparency matters. Borrowing from those who trust you to support your lifestyle is wrong. The fall from grace can happen to anyone, regardless of status. The path forward requires humility, responsibility, and an understanding that money is a tool, not an end in itself. We will next explore a very different disappearance, one that takes place in the icy silence of the mountains. Beyond Maxwell, the late 20th and early 21st centuries have seen other dramatic corporate falls. Enron, once hailed as a model of innovation in the energy sector, collapsed in 2001 after executives hid debt and inflated profits. Thousands of employees lost jobs and savings. The scandal led to criminal convictions and spurred reforms in accounting and corporate governance. More recently, the downfall of Theranos, a startup that promised revolutionary blood testing, highlighted how charisma and hype can mask deception. Its founder, once celebrated as a visionary, faced trial for defrauding investors and endangering patients. These cases underscore that charisma and growth stories can seduce even experienced investors. The line between visionary risk-taking and reckless deception can be thin. The psychological impact on leaders who fall from grace is profound. Many spend years building their identities around their companies. When those companies collapse, the sense of self can crumble alongside. Some respond with denial, insisting that their vision was sound and blaming external forces. Others retreat from public life. There are also those who make amends, dedicating themselves to restitution or advocacy. Reflecting on these different responses helps us understand that redemption is possible, but requires honesty and empathy. It also shows that a fall from grace, while painful, can lead to growth. For society, corporate collapses serve as wake-up calls. They prompt regulators to tighten oversight. They encourage investors to ask hard questions. They remind us that sustainable businesses require transparency and accountability. They also highlight the importance of whistleblowers, the individuals who risk their careers to expose wrongdoing. Without them, many scandals would remain hidden. The courage of these individuals adds a hopeful note to otherwise grim stories. It shows that integrity can triumph over greed. As we consider the fall from grace, we can honor those who, at personal cost, bring truth to light. Chapter 4: Vanished on the Mountain. High mountains can be both beautiful and dangerous. Their snow-covered peaks look pure and inviting from a distance, but once you step onto a glacier or traverse a steep slope, you feel how fragile your place in that environment is. The air is thin, the ground shifts beneath your feet, and weather can change rapidly. For many people, climbing mountains is a way to feel alive. It is also a way to test one's limits. In April 2018, a German billionaire named Karl Laravan Hobb went to the Swiss Alps for such a challenge. What followed remains one of the most intriguing disappearances in modern times. Karl Laravan Hobb was born into a family that owned Tengelmann Group, a large retail chain. He was known for being adventurous and private. On the morning of his disappearance, he took a ski lift up a mountain near the Matterhorn. He planned to train for an upcoming race. According to reports, he was last seen heading up the lift alone. He did not meet his guide at the arranged time. When he failed to return to his hotel, alarms were raised. Over the next 6 days, helicopters and rescue teams searched the area. They scanned slopes and valleys, used infrared cameras and dogs, and spoke to witnesses. Yet no trace of Hobb was found. In the weeks and months that followed, questions multiplied. People asked how an experienced skier with resources and equipment could vanish without a trace. Some suggested that he may have fallen into a crevasse, hidden under snow. Others wondered if he staged his disappearance. Rumors surfaced that he had a relationship with a woman in Russia and might have planned to start a new life there. Years later, a German news investigation claimed that he may indeed be alive in Moscow with a partner named Veronika Ermolova. The report suggested that he might have faked his death to avoid family conflicts over inheritance or to escape pressure from tax authorities. His family rejected these claims, insisting that he must have died in an accident. The story highlights the complexity of personal and family ties among the wealthy. When large fortunes are at stake, every action is scrutinized. If a person disappears, speculation rises about motives. Is it possible to give up everything and start anew? For most people, such an idea seems impossible. Wealth leaves footprints, properties, accounts, companies. Erasing all evidence requires planning. In Hobb's case, there is no public proof of a staged disappearance. There is also no body. The mystery remains unresolved. In 2021, a court declared him legally dead. His younger brother Christian assumed leadership of the company. Legal authorities needed closure to manage inheritance and business matters. Yet for many, the question of what happened lingers. The mountain setting adds to the aura of the story. The Alps are a place where nature can hide secrets. Avalanches can bury an entire person without leaving a mark. Crevasses can swallow bodies that are never found. The search for Hobb was extensive but not unlimited. Rescue teams have to balance risks to themselves. After days of intense work, they concluded there was little chance of survival and ended the operation. For the family, the lack of a body made grieving harder. Without concrete evidence, hope can persist even when rationally there is little ground for it. This disappearance also prompts us to consider how we handle uncertainty. In our daily lives, we seek closure. When someone dies, we have funerals and rituals. When someone leaves, we have farewells. But when someone simply disappears, we are left with open-ended questions. This can be psychologically difficult. In Hobb's case, the mix of adventure, family wealth, and rumored intrigue created a narrative that captured the public imagination. People projected their own fears and fantasies onto the story. Some saw him as a tragic victim of nature. Others saw him as someone who chose freedom over obligation. From a practical perspective, the case raises issues about inheritance and corporate governance. Large family businesses often have succession plans. When the leader vanishes, those plans are tested. The remaining members must decide how to continue operations. They must also deal with legal processes to declare the missing person dead. In many jurisdictions, there is a waiting period before a person can be declared legally deceased. Families sometimes seek court approval sooner to manage assets. This can feel cold, but businesses cannot function with uncertainty. In Hobbes' case, the court's declaration allowed the company to move forward. It also opened the door to speculation that the family wanted control and thus might benefit from declaring him dead. As listeners, we can hold space for multiple possibilities. It is possible that Carl van Hobbes died alone on the mountain, his body hidden under snow. It is also possible that he chose to disappear. Without evidence, we cannot know. The story invites us to reflect on our own attachment to certainty. In a world of complex identities and responsibilities, disappearing may seem appealing to some, but it also leaves behind pain and questions. As we move to the next chapter, we will see how disappearances can happen not in remote mountains, but in the digital realm, where code and passwords can make billions vanish into thin air. Before his disappearance, Carl van Hobbes was known not only for business acumen, but also for athletic pursuits. He participated in extreme sports like ski mountaineering and endurance racing. Friends described him as disciplined and cautious. His decision to train alone on the mountain surprised some, but others noted that he had done similar trips before. These details add nuance to the story. They show that Hobbes was experienced but still vulnerable. Nature does not grant immunity based on skill. Even the best can miscalculate or be caught off guard by sudden changes in weather. The Alps have claimed many lives, famous and unknown. In 1957, the American billionaire John D. Rockefeller, III, survived a plane crash in the Alps that killed 3 others. In 1998, Mitchell Trudeau, son of former Canadian Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau and brother of current Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, died in an avalanche in British Columbia. These events, while not tied to business, reveal how the mountains touch people from all walks of life. They also highlight the dual allure and danger of high places. For those who climb, the peaks offer a sense of freedom and perspective. They provide a contrast to boardrooms and city streets, yet they also demand respect and planning. As climate change alters weather patterns, mountain safety becomes more complex. Warmer temperatures can destabilize glaciers and increase rockfall. Traditional routes may become unsafe. Guides and climbers must adapt. Hobbes' disappearance raises questions about preparedness and the need for better communication in remote areas. It also invites reflection on why people seek out risky environments. Some find clarity in the challenge. Others seek escape from pressures. In both cases, the mountain becomes a metaphor for the desire to transcend daily life. When tragedies occur, they remind us that while adventure can bring growth, it also carries profound risk. Chapter 5: The Digital Ghost. In the age of the Internet, wealth can be as intangible as a string of numbers. Cryptocurrencies promise freedom from traditional banks. They allow people to send money across borders in seconds. They also come with risks that are hard to grasp. One of the most striking stories of digital wealth disappearing revolves around a young man named Gerald Cotton. At 30 years old, he ran a cryptocurrency exchange called Quadriga CX. At the height of its success, the platform handled hundreds of millions of dollars. Then Gerald died unexpectedly in India, and with him went the keys to a fortune. Gerald Cotton was born in Canada and studied computer science. He became fascinated with Bitcoin and other digital currencies. In 2013, he co-founded Quadriga CX to make it easier for Canadians to buy and sell cryptocurrencies. The business grew quickly as more people became interested. Users sent their money to the exchange, trusting that they could withdraw it when needed. The company held private keys to digital wallets on behalf of clients. These keys were like secret passwords. Without them, the funds could not be accessed. In December 2018, Cotton and his wife traveled to India. Reports say he died of complications from Crohn's disease while in Jaipur. He was only 30. The news shocked the community. It soon became clear that something was wrong. Quadriga CX announced that Cotton had taken the private keys to his grave. More than $250 million worth of cryptocurrencies were now inaccessible. Customers could not withdraw their money. Panic spread on forums and social media. Investigations began. As authorities looked into the company's operations, they discovered disturbing facts. Gerald had been moving money from the exchange into his own accounts. He had created fake user accounts to trade with real customers. He used their deposits to finance his lifestyle and to try to turn a profit through risky bets. In other words, the exchange was not holding customers' assets as promised. It was operating like a Ponzi scheme. New deposits were used to pay withdrawals, and when Cotton died, the flow stopped. Lawyers and accountants struggled to piece together the remaining assets. Many users had to accept that they would never recover their full balances. The story of Quadriga CX is a warning about trust in the digital age. Cryptocurrencies offer freedom, but they also require personal responsibility. When you hold your own keys, you control your money. When you give your keys to someone else, you depend on their honesty and security practices. Cotton's death revealed the danger of centralizing control. It also exposed a lack of oversight in the cryptocurrency industry. Without clear regulations, exchanges can operate without proper audits. Customers may not know whether their money is safe until it is too late. For Cotton's widow, the experience was devastating. She lost her husband and faced public scrutiny. She eventually reached a settlement with the estate, forfeiting some assets to help repay creditors. People debated whether Cotton had faked his death and whether he might still be alive somewhere with the missing funds. There is no evidence to support those theories, but the lack of closure fuels speculation. The digital nature of the money makes the disappearance feel almost ghostly. Unlike a ship sinking or a person vanishing on a mountain, this disappearance involves invisible codes and screens. This case also shines a light on how rapidly fortunes can rise and fall in the tech world. Gerald Cotton went from being a young entrepreneur to a symbol of crypto's promise and then to the center of a scandal. The money that was lost was very real to the people who entrusted it to him. Some had invested life savings. Others had planned to buy homes or pay for school. For them, the digital ghost is not an abstract cautionary tale. It is a personal tragedy. Looking beyond this single story, we see a larger pattern. New technologies often attract people looking to make fast profits. They also attract opportunists who take advantage of the hype. Regulators can struggle to keep up. Investors may not fully understand the risks. When something goes wrong, the losses can be huge. The tale of Quadriga CX reminds us that new forms of wealth do not change old truths. Trust is earned, not given. Transparency matters. If a deal seems too good to be true, it probably is. As we leave the digital world and return to the realm of governments and law, we will examine how some billionaires disappear not because of accidents or disease, but because they choose to run. They may flee legal scrutiny, hide their assets, and assume false identities. Our next chapter follows one such fugitive from justice who is rumored to live under a different name in a distant city. The collapse of Quadriga CX is not the only cautionary tale in the cryptocurrency world. In 2014, MT, Gox, once the largest Bitcoin exchange, filed for bankruptcy after hackers stole hundreds of thousands of Bitcoins. Users lost access to their funds, and lawsuits dragged on for years. More recently, reports of hacking, insider theft, and platform mismanagement have continued to surface across various exchanges. These incidents highlight a key challenge of decentralized finance. Without traditional institutions, the responsibility for security rests heavily on individuals and small companies. When those responsible act negligently or maliciously, the losses can be devastating. Cryptocurrencies also illustrate the psychology of speculation. The promise of quick riches attracts people who may not fully understand the technology or risks. Social media amplifies hype, encouraging herd behavior. When prices rise, people feel brilliant. When prices fall, they feel cheated. This emotional roller coaster can lead to decisions based on fear or greed rather than careful analysis. In Cotton's case, his ability to move funds without oversight suggests that some users ignored red flags because they hoped for high returns. The lesson is that due diligence is essential, even in emerging fields. Trust should be earned through transparency and regulation, not charisma or promises. Digital assets pose unique challenges for regulators. They are borderless and fast-moving. Governments have struggled to craft rules that protect consumers without stifling innovation. Some countries have banned certain cryptocurrencies, others have embraced them. The lack of coordinated global standards creates opportunities for bad actors, yet the technology also holds potential for financial inclusion and efficiency. Striking the right balance will require cooperation across borders and sectors. The story of Quadriga CX adds urgency to this task. It shows that ignoring regulation does not mean avoiding problems. It simply creates different ones. Chapter 6: The Fugitive Financier. Not all disappearances are accidents. Some are deliberate acts by people trying to evade the law. When enormous sums are involved, the lengths individuals will go to avoid capture can be extraordinary. One of the most notorious cases of recent years revolves around a Malaysian businessman named Jho Low. Once a globetrotter who rubbed shoulders with celebrities and politicians, he became a fugitive wanted for his role in one of the world's biggest financial scandals. Jho Low came from a wealthy family but wanted more. He studied at a prestigious school in the United States and built a network of influential friends. He helped set up a Malaysian government fund known as One Malaysia Development Berhad, or 1MDB. The fund was supposed to attract investment to spur economic growth. Instead, investigators say billions of dollars were siphoned off. The money funded lavish parties, jewelry, art, and even a Hollywood movie. Jho Low allegedly used it to buy luxury properties in New York and Los Angeles, as well as a super yacht and a private jet. When the scandal came to light, authorities in several countries began investigations. The U.S. Department of Justice filed lawsuits to seize assets. Malaysia's government fell amid public outrage. Former Prime Minister Najib Razak was tried and convicted for his involvement. Meanwhile, Jho Low disappeared. For years his whereabouts were unknown. Some said he was living in China under protection. Others believed he was moving between safe houses. Journalists continued to follow the money trail. In 2024, investigative reporters from Brazen, a media outlet run by Bradley Hope and Tom Wright, who previously wrote about 1MDB, reported that Jho Low was living in Shanghai with a forged Australian passport. According to their sources, he used a false name and traveled with the help of officials in multiple countries. He had previously been granted citizenship in Cyprus and St. Kitts and Nevis, but those passports were revoked after the scandal. Traveling on a fake passport is illegal and risky, yet Low was willing to take that risk to remain free. The report painted a picture of a man who still had access to luxury even while on the run. He was said to enjoy fine dining and maintain a network of contacts. He relied on connections and money to stay ahead of authorities. The hunt for Jho Low highlights the challenges of enforcing financial laws across borders. Different countries have different levels of cooperation. A fugitive with money can move assets through shell companies and friendly jurisdictions. Authorities must navigate diplomatic relationships to track suspects. In Low's case, Malaysian officials have repeatedly said they want him extradited. Yet without an official agreement and cooperation from the country where he is hiding, it is difficult. The situation raises questions about accountability in a globalized world. How can justice be served if borders provide protection to those with resources? This story also reveals the human cost of financial crime. The money stolen from 1MDB was meant to benefit ordinary Malaysians. It was supposed to support infrastructure, education, and healthcare. Instead, it funded luxury goods and bribes. The scandal contributed to political instability and public distrust. When people in power misuse public funds, the impact can last for generations. Recovering the stolen money is a slow process. While investigators have seized some assets, much remains hidden. From a personal perspective, living as a fugitive is not glamorous. It means constant fear of being recognized. It means limited contact with friends and family. It means never being sure of tomorrow. Jho Low may dine in fancy restaurants, but he cannot live openly. He must rely on others to protect him. He is trapped by the very wealth he stole. This paradox is central to many stories of disappearing billionaires. The things that once brought freedom and status become chains. As we reflect on this chapter, we see again how wealth and power interact with law and morality. A person with access to billions can influence politicians and hide behind complex financial structures, yet the weight of wrongdoing follows them. Justice systems may be slow, but they persist. The case of Jho Low is ongoing. Whether he will ever face trial remains uncertain. For now, he remains a symbol of greed and impunity. Our journey continues with a look at those who disappear not because of crime, but because they choose to give away their wealth and fade quietly into a more modest life. To fully grasp the 1MDB scandal, it helps to understand how complex the web of transactions was. Money was moved through shell companies across multiple jurisdictions, including the United States, Switzerland, and the British Virgin Islands. Some funds were used to buy high-end properties in Manhattan and Beverly Hills. Other funds went to finance The Wolf of Wall Street, a film about another financial fraud. Investigators traced flows through banks that failed to flag suspicious transfers. The scale of the scheme exposed weaknesses in the global financial system. It showed how easy it can be to launder money when oversight is lax and when influential people are involved. Law enforcement agencies from different countries have worked together to recover assets. The U.S. Department of Justice seized a yacht, private jet, and real estate linked to the scandal. Swiss authorities froze accounts. Malaysian authorities charged former Prime Minister Najib Razak, who was found guilty and sentenced to prison. Yet Jho Low remains at large. The difficulty in securing his extradition illustrates the challenges of international law. Countries may lack extradition treaties. They may value diplomatic relationships over prosecuting a single individual. They may also be influenced by the fear of revealing their own citizens' involvement. Meanwhile, the people of Malaysia continue to feel the effects of the scandal in reduced public services and lost opportunities. On a human level, the story of Jho Low shows how greed can erode integrity. At university, he was known for his charm and generosity. He cultivated friendships with wealthy heirs from around the world. He used those connections to access funds. As the scheme grew, so did his ego. Reports describe lavish parties with champagne and celebrities, some of whom later returned gifts when the source of the funds became clear. Low's downfall is a reminder that charisma and networking can be used for destructive ends as easily as for constructive ones. It also highlights the importance of due diligence in business partnerships. Chapter 7: The Philanthropist's Farewell. Not every disappearance is clouded by scandal. Sometimes people step out of the spotlight by choice, not because they must hide, but because they want to change the world in a different way. Chuck Feeney is one such person. He co-founded Duty Free Shoppers, a business that sold luxury goods to international travelers. The company was enormously successful. At his peak, Feeney's wealth made him a billionaire many times over, yet he became famous not for holding onto his fortune, but for giving it away. His story shows how a person can disappear from the rich lists and still leave a lasting legacy. Feeney was born during the Great Depression to Irish-American parents. He served in the Air Force and later built his business with partners. He loved making deals but found little joy in accumulating material goods. In the 1980s, he quietly transferred his shares in Duty Free Shoppers to a charitable foundation called Atlantic Philanthropies. For decades, he insisted that his giving remain anonymous. He funded education, health care, and human rights projects around the world. Universities received scholarships, hospitals were built, and communities in conflict zones received support. Few knew the source of the funds because Feeney kept his name out of the news. Feeney lived modestly. He wore a $5 watch, traveled economy class, and did not own a car or a house. He believed that giving while living allows a donor to see the impact of their generosity. It's much more fun to give while you are alive than to give when you're dead, he said. He called his philosophy giving while living. For years, Forbes did not include him on their list of billionaires because he no longer owned the assets. When his identity as a major philanthropist was finally revealed, people were surprised that someone could give away billions without seeking credit. By the time he finished his philanthropic journey, Feeney had donated over $8 billion. What makes his story fit into this series is not only the scale of his giving, but also the way he disappeared from the ranks of the ultra-wealthy. In a world that often equates success with net worth, Feeney's quiet exit challenged assumptions. He showed that wealth can be a tool rather than a trophy. By shedding his fortune, he freed himself from the trappings of wealth. He also avoided the complications that often accompany large inheritances. Feeney and his wife ended up renting a small apartment. They were content. His children supported his decision and knew they would not inherit large sums. Instead, they were encouraged to build their own paths. Feeney's example influenced others. Warren Buffett and Bill Gates praised him and used his philosophy when launching the Giving Pledge, a campaign encouraging billionaires to donate most of their wealth. Feeney proved that such giving is possible. He also demonstrated that anonymity can preserve dignity for both the giver and the recipient. In many communities, his gifts built institutions that continue to serve long after his name is forgotten. He did not seek plaques or buildings bearing his name. He preferred to see the work done and then quietly move on. The contrast between Feeney's disappearance and those of fugitives or victims of accidents is striking. He controlled his exit. He planned it carefully and communicated his intentions to his family. He did not leave chaos or legal battles behind. Instead, he left a blueprint for responsible wealth stewardship. It is important, however, to remember that his ability to give was made possible by a system that allowed him to accumulate vast wealth in the first place. Not everyone has that opportunity. Yet his decision to relinquish his fortune shows that individual choices can make a difference. For those who follow his story, there are lessons about generosity and contentment. Money can bring comfort, but it is not the source of meaning. Shared experiences, relationships, and contributions to others can offer deeper fulfillment. Feeney's life invites us to redefine success. It encourages us to ask how much is enough and what we might do with any excess. It shows that disappearing from the billionaire ranks can be an act of liberation rather than loss. As we leave this chapter, we carry a different image of disappearance. It is not an escape from justice or a tragic accident. It is a quiet fading of a public identity so that others can thrive. In the next chapter, we will look at a more impersonal disappearance, the phenomenon of people falling off wealth lists due to market forces and economic changes. These shifts reveal the volatile nature of fortunes and remind us that even the richest can find themselves no longer counted among the elite. Around the world, many other philanthropists have chosen paths similar to Chuck Feeney's. Andrew Carnegie, a steel magnate from the 19th century, gave away most of his wealth to build libraries and educational institutions. He believed that the man who dies rich dies disgraced. In recent years, Mackenzie Scott, former wife of Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, has donated billions to colleges, food banks, and community organizations. She has done so quickly and with minimal bureaucracy, surprising recipients who often learned of their grants by email. Her approach reflects a trust in local leaders and a desire to distribute wealth broadly. Philanthropy is not without controversy. Some critics argue that large donors have outsized influence over public life. For example, when a billionaire funds a charter school network, it can shape education policy and redirect resources from traditional public schools. When donors support political causes, they may blur the line between charity and lobbying. There are also concerns about tax avoidance. Donations can reduce tax liabilities, allowing wealthy individuals to influence public spending indirectly. These debates reflect broader questions about democracy and power. Who gets to decide which causes are worthy? Should public policy rely on the choices of a few wealthy individuals or on collective decision-making? Despite these debates, philanthropy remains a powerful force for good when done thoughtfully. It can support innovation and reach communities that governments overlook. It can preserve cultural heritage, protect the environment, and provide disaster relief. For donors, giving can be an antidote to isolation. It connects them to diverse groups of people and broadens their perspective. For recipients, it can provide opportunities that would otherwise be unattainable. The process can build bridges across social divides. As more people consider giving while living, the culture around wealth may gradually shift from accumulation to contribution. This shift could redefine what it means to succeed. Chapter 8: The Vanishing List. Every year magazines publish lists ranking the world's wealthiest people. The names on those lists change over time. New fortunes are made, and old fortunes shrink. While the rise of a new billionaire often makes headlines, the quiet exit of another receives less attention. Yet the removal of names tells a story about the volatility of wealth and the forces that shape it. The 2025 Forbes list, for example, saw more than 100 individuals fall off due to falling share prices, fraud allegations, and shifting markets. Understanding why these disappearances happen reveals broader patterns in the economy. Consider the case of entrepreneurs whose companies are tied to technology. Tech stocks can soar when investors are optimistic about growth. They can also plummet when expectations change. A company that introduces a new app may enjoy a high valuation one year and struggle the next if users move on. For founders who hold large stakes, their net worth is tied to volatile market sentiment. When stocks fall, they may lose billionaire status overnight. This is not because they spent or lost money personally, but because the market revalued their holdings. In 2025, founders of companies like Snowflake and e-commerce platforms saw their fortunes dip as investors adjusted expectations. Another group affected are heirs whose wealth comes from family businesses. When a patriarch or matriarch passes away, the fortune is often split among multiple heirs. Each individual's share may no longer reach the billionaire threshold. Additionally, family fortunes can decline if the business faces challenges. For example, a downturn in the automotive industry can reduce the dividends and share prices that support an heir's wealth. The 2025 list noted that some members of long-established industrial families fell off because their company's profits declined. The fluctuations may not change their comfortable lifestyle, but they do alter their status in the eyes of the media. Fraud allegations and legal troubles also contribute to the vanishing list. When someone is accused of wrongdoing, investors often sell off shares related to them. Courts may freeze assets, If the individual's wealth is tied to a company that depends on trust, the damage can be swift. There are also cases where authorities seize assets to compensate victims. While this serves justice, it can also remove someone from the billionaire ranks. The 2025 list included some figures who dropped off because their assets were frozen pending investigations. These disappearances are less about market forces and more about accountability. Macroeconomic changes play a role as well. When currencies depreciate, fortunes measured in those currencies may shrink when converted to US dollars, the standard measure for many wealth lists. Inflation and high interest rates can reduce the value of assets or limit growth. Policy changes in countries can impact sectors. For instance, new regulations on technology or property can affect valuations. Entrepreneurs who seemed unstoppable may struggle under new rules. The global economy is interconnected, and a slowdown in one region can ripple across others. This interdependence means that even well-managed fortunes are subject to forces beyond any individual's control. Why does it matter who is on a list? For some, it is a matter of pride or status. Being listed confers a kind of legitimacy. It can attract investors and partners. For observers, lists serve as snapshots of broader economic trends. They show which sectors are growing, which regions are creating wealth, and how inequality is changing. The exit of certain names can signal shifts in industries. When many tech founders fall off, it may suggest a cooling in that sector. When heirs disappear, it can indicate that wealth is spreading across more people within families. There is also a human side to these changes. Losing billionaire status does not mean losing all wealth, but it can affect a person's identity. Those who derive their sense of worth from their ranking may struggle with the loss. Some may experience relief, finding freedom from public scrutiny. Others may feel embarrassment or fear that it signals a decline in their business. The reaction depends on how they view money. For those who see wealth as a responsibility, losing it may lead to introspection about what truly matters. As we consider the vanishing list, we see that wealth is dynamic. It grows and shrinks, sometimes through no direct action by the person who holds it. The lists we read are snapshots, not permanent records. They are influenced by accounting methods, currency values, and stock market swings. Understanding this helps us put headlines in perspective. A person appearing on or disappearing from a wealth list is not necessarily experiencing a dramatic change in their daily life. It may be an artifact of measurement. At the same time, these movements highlight the fragility of fortunes. $1 billion can disappear quickly if a company fails or if legal issues arise. The vanishing list reminds us that even the richest are not immune to risk. It also underscores the importance of diversification and caution. As we move to the next chapter, we will explore a more personal dimension of disappearance, the tension between public power and private independence, and how political pressures can push wealthy people into hiding. Wealth lists have not always existed. Forbes published its first list of the richest Americans in 1918. The idea appealed to readers who were curious about fortunes they could hardly imagine. Over time, the lists became more detailed and global. They began to include not only industrialists, but also tech founders, entertainers, and heirs. The methodology evolved too. incorporating stock holdings, real estate, private companies, and estimates of debt. As lists gained influence, they shaped public perceptions. Being on a list could attract investors and customers. It could also attract scrutiny. Some people actively sought inclusion as a badge of honor. Others tried to avoid it to protect privacy. The growth of social media has amplified the impact of wealth rankings. A single announcement about a person's rise or fall can trend worldwide. This can create pressure on those listed to maintain or improve their position. It can also distort priorities. Businesses may make short-term decisions to boost valuations rather than invest in long-term health. Investors may chase trends instead of fundamentals. Commentators may focus on the spectacle of wealth rather than the underlying contributions of entrepreneurs. Recognizing these dynamics can help us interpret lists critically. They are snapshots, not definitive measures of worth. The vanishing list also highlights regional disparities. In some years, most of the new billionaires come from one country or sector. When those sectors cool, the names disappear. This movement reflects the ebb and flow of global capital. It underscores the connection between policy and prosperity. For example, government incentives for technology can create wealth quickly. Changes in tax policy can redistribute wealth. In countries with weaker rule of law, fortunes may vanish due to political upheaval. In more stable environments, fortunes may persist across generations. Understanding these patterns can inform public debates about economic development and inequality. Ultimately, wealth lists are mirrors. They reflect our collective fascination with money and status. They also reveal our values. When we celebrate someone for their place on a list, we implicitly endorse the idea that net worth is a primary measure of success. When we question why certain names are missing, we open a conversation about fairness and opportunity. By looking at the vanishing list, we are invited to reconsider what we admire. We can choose to celebrate resilience, innovation, and generosity over sheer accumulation. Chapter 9: The Price of Nonconformity. Returning to the theme of disappearing tycoons in China, we dive deeper into the social and political context that shapes these events. Earlier, we noted the cases of Hui Ka-yan and others caught in the government's crackdown on private enterprise. In this chapter, we examine why nonconformity in business can lead to disappearance and what it says about the relationship between wealth and the state. China's economic model is unique. It combines market mechanisms with strict political control. The Communist Party sets national goals and expects businesses to support those aims. In recent years, the leadership has emphasized common prosperity, a concept that calls for reducing inequality and preventing the excessive accumulation of wealth by individuals. Officials have also warned against what they call disorderly expansion of capital. These policies serve both economic and ideological purposes. They aim to make growth more sustainable while reinforcing party legitimacy. For business leaders, this means that success must align with political narratives. Nonconformity can take many forms. It may be overt criticism of policy, as in the case of property executive Ren Zhiqiang, who publicly challenged leadership and was later sentenced to prison on corruption charges. It may be aggressive expansion that challenges regulators, as some fintech companies discovered. It may be running up large debts that threaten financial stability, as Evergrande's $300 billion in liabilities did. It may also be personal behavior that appears to set one person above the collective. When entrepreneurs engage in philanthropy or build global profiles, they must ensure that their actions do not eclipse the party's image. The case of Jack Ma, co-founder of Alibaba, illustrates this dynamic. Though not mentioned earlier, Ma's situation is widely known. In 2020, he criticized China's financial regulatory system. Shortly after, his company's spin-off, Ant Group, faced a halted initial public offering. Ma kept a low profile for months. He reappeared later but had clearly retreated from the center stage. While not officially disappeared, his absence reminded others of the boundaries. Business leaders learned that public disagreement with regulators could have swift consequences. What motivates the state to act? Some observers see the crackdown as necessary to curb risks like housing bubbles and financial fraud. Others view it as a political purge to consolidate power and ensure loyalty. It may be both. The party has long worried about the growth of private capital and its influence. It does not want another center of power to challenge its authority. By disciplining high-profile entrepreneurs, the leadership sends a message to the entire private sector. Wealth alone does not grant immunity from party discipline. For the individuals targeted, the price of nonconformity can be steep. They may face detention without clear charges. Their companies may lose value as investors lose confidence. Their families may be restricted in travel or placed under observation. In some cases, executives may cooperate with authorities and later reappear. In others, they vanish into the system. The opacity makes it hard to know the truth. This uncertainty breeds speculation, which can harm markets and society. Employees wonder whether they will be paid. Customers worry about services. Partners hesitate to engage. This environment influences how entrepreneurs behave. Many choose to remain low-key. They avoid public statements that could be interpreted as criticism. They align their philanthropic efforts with state priorities. They keep debt levels manageable. Some even invite party committees into their companies to ensure alignment. For those who do not conform, disappearance is a risk. This creates a climate of caution that affects innovation. While stability is important, too much control can stifle creativity. Balancing these forces is one of China's major challenges. Internationally, the crackdown has consequences. Foreign investors may hesitate to invest in companies if they fear executives could vanish. Global partners may worry about continuity. The state tries to reassure investors by emphasizing law and order, but the line between legal enforcement and political discipline can be blurry. In a globalized economy, these perceptions matter. They influence where capital flows and how companies expand abroad. They also affect China's image as a place of opportunity and risk. For ordinary citizens, the price of nonconformity may seem distant, yet it touches their lives indirectly. When companies like Evergrande struggle, homebuyers face delays. When investment funds go under, retirees lose savings. The ripple effects show how intimately connected big businesses are to everyday life. The state's actions aim to protect the system, but the methods can feel harsh. Citizens may support cracking down on corruption while still feeling uneasy about the lack of transparency. As we leave this chapter, we recognize that the price of nonconformity is not unique to China. In many societies, stepping outside accepted norms can lead to ostracism, legal trouble, or worse. The difference lies in the mechanisms and the scale. The stories of disappearing tycoons remind us that wealth does not exist in a vacuum. It is embedded in social and political structures. Understanding those structures helps us make sense of why some fortunes vanish when their owners step out of line. In the next chapter, we will explore the dynamics within families and how inheritance can lead to disappearances of a different kind. To appreciate the price of nonconformity in China, one must understand the concept of face. In many East Asian cultures, maintaining harmony and avoiding public embarrassment are paramount. When a business leader criticizes the government or behaves in a way that draws negative attention, it causes a loss of face for those in authority. The response can be swift to restore balance. This cultural aspect intertwines with political structures. It influences how dissent is handled and how discipline is enacted. Entrepreneurs who understand these nuances may find ways to innovate without challenging authority. Those who ignore them risk backlash. The party's approach to private wealth is also shaped by ideology. The Communist Party of China was founded on principles that opposed capitalist exploitation. Allowing private enterprise to flourish was a pragmatic decision to boost the economy. Yet there remains a tension between ideological purity and economic efficiency. This tension plays out in policy debates and in decisions about specific companies. When the party feels that private firms stray too far from socialist principles, it reins them in. This can be seen in regulations targeting online tutoring, gaming, and other sectors perceived as speculative or harmful to social cohesion. International observers sometimes interpret these moves through a purely economic lens. They see the crackdown as a way to manage risk. But within China, there is also a moral narrative. Leaders frame their actions as protecting the common people from greedy elites. They emphasize that everyone should contribute to national goals. By bringing high-profile tycoons to heel, they signal that no one is above the collective. Whether one agrees with this approach or not, it reflects a different relationship between the individual and the state than is found in many other countries. Understanding this helps us avoid judging through a singular cultural frame. Chapter 10: Family Secrets. Within the walls of great houses, away from cameras and reporters, families often grapple with the same issues as anyone else: love, jealousy, duty, and fear. When a family controls a fortune worth billions, these emotions can be intensified. Decisions about inheritance can bring out the best and the worst in people. In some cases, disagreements lead to lawsuits. In others, they lead to unexpected disappearances. While we do not have specific cases from our earlier research that involve unsolved vanishings due to family conflicts, history and literature are full of stories about heirs who run away or are cast out. This chapter reflects on the role of family dynamics in shaping the fate of fortunes. Imagine a family where the patriarch built a business from scratch. He spent his life turning a small shop into a global corporation. When he dies, he leaves shares to his children. Some are deeply involved in the business, others prefer art or philanthropy. The will is complex. Maybe it favors one child over another. Maybe it includes conditions that seem unfair. Tensions arise. Accusations are made. In some cases, a family member might decide to step away entirely. They may decline their inheritance or leave to avoid conflict. They become a kind of disappearing billionaire, not through external pressure, but through personal choice. One real example involves an heir to a luxury brand who reportedly considered renouncing his fortune. According to some reports, a member of a famous fashion family contemplated giving up his inheritance and adopting a more modest life. While details are scarce and the story may be exaggerated, the idea sparked conversation. People wondered why anyone would walk away from billions. The reasons can include disagreements over how the company is run, a desire to avoid public scrutiny, or ethical concerns about wealth. Though this story cannot be fully verified, it illustrates how family expectations can be heavy. Choosing to leave can feel like liberation. Family secrets can also involve hidden children or undisclosed assets. Inheritance disputes sometimes reveal affairs or investments that were kept quiet. When such secrets surface, they can change the distribution of wealth. A person who thought they would inherit a large share might find their portion reduced. Feelings of betrayal can lead to estrangement. In extreme cases, individuals may disappear from public view to escape the media frenzy and legal battles. They may move to another country, change their name, or live quietly with their new circumstances. Parents may also choose to withhold wealth from their children for their own good. Some wealthy individuals believe that large inheritances can harm their children's motivation and character. They may decide to donate much of their wealth to charity, as Chuck Feeney did. This can upset children who feel entitled to the money. They may cut ties with their parents or step away in anger. In such cases, the disappearance is emotional rather than physical. Relationships are broken, and the family is changed forever. Another aspect of family secrets involves guardianship and trust. When heirs are minors or deemed unfit to manage the fortune, trustees are appointed. These arrangements can become contentious. Trustees may make decisions that family members dislike. Lawsuits can follow. The stress can push people away from the public eye. They may retreat into private lives to avoid further pain. The legal battles may continue without them, but their absence is felt. The fortune continues to exist, but the family is fractured. In exploring these scenarios, we see that disappearing from wealth lists can be an act of self-preservation. It can be a choice to prioritize peace of mind over material comfort. Families in the public eye face immense pressure. Every move is scrutinized. Mistakes are amplified. For some, the only way to retain agency is to step away. They become the invisible rich, people who have access to resources but choose not to flaunt them. They might live in smaller homes, drive unremarkable cars, and avoid the company of people who only value them for their wealth. This chapter serves as a reminder that wealth does not shield anyone from human complexity. It may even exacerbate it. The stories of missing tycoons in earlier chapters involved government pressure, crime, and accidents. Here, the tension is internal. The disappearance happens within the family. There may not be official statements or search parties. The world may never know, because those involved may wish it that way. Our focus shifts from large public dramas to private narratives that play out behind closed doors. As we transition to the next chapter, consider the ways in which families shape our understanding of ourselves. Money can amplify our sense of responsibility or our fear of failure. It can unite siblings in a shared mission or divide them through jealousy. How we handle inheritance reflects our values. For billionaires and for ordinary people alike, the conversation around money and family is one of the most delicate. We now turn to a broader view, examining the experience of those who flee not only because of family conflict or law enforcement, but because they are caught in the crossfire of geopolitical struggles. Literature and history offer vivid illustrations of wealth tearing families apart. Shakespeare's play King Lear tells of a monarch who divides his kingdom among his daughters based on their flattery, leading to betrayal and madness. In the real world, the Vanderbilt family in the United States watched as the fortune built by Cornelius Vanderbilt dissipated over generations through lavish spending and familial rivalry. The Gucci family, founders of the luxury brand, endured scandals and lawsuits that led them to sell the company. These narratives, while different in detail, share common themes: ambition, pride, and the struggle between individual desire and family duty. Psychologists note that growing up in a wealthy family can present unique challenges. Children may feel immense pressure to live up to a legacy. They may fear failure more than children from modest backgrounds because the fall would be from a greater height. They may struggle to form relationships based on trust rather than status. In some cases, the desire to escape these pressures leads them to leave home or renounce wealth. For others, it leads to risky behavior as they try to carve out their own identity. Understanding these dynamics allows us to see disappearing heirs with empathy rather than judgment. It is also important to recognize the role of culture and law in shaping inheritance. In some countries, laws require wealth to be divided equally among offspring. In others, patriarchs can choose a single heir. These rules influence family dynamics. When the law favors equal division, the fortune may dilute quickly, leading to fewer public displays of wealth. When it allows concentration, internal battles can be fierce. Cultural norms also determine whether children can challenge a will or whether disobedience leads to disinheritance. In any case, the legal framework becomes a stage where personal drama unfolds. Chapter 11: The Path of Escape. We have seen how individuals disappear due to government crackdowns, family disputes, and personal choices. Another form of disappearance occurs when wealthy people flee their countries to escape instability, war, or persecution. This is not about hiding assets or avoiding taxes. It is about survival and safety. Throughout history, conflict and political turmoil have forced even the richest to abandon their homes. In this chapter, we explore how the path of escape shapes the destiny of wealth and the lives of those who carry it. Think of the early 20th century when revolutions swept across empires. Families who owned factories and land fled from Russia during the Bolshevik uprising. They left behind estates, art, and jewelry. Some managed to smuggle gold or gems sewn into clothing. Others arrived in new countries with nothing. These refugees often rebuilt their fortunes, but the original wealth was gone. It was seized by the new regime or simply lost. The memory of that loss stayed with them and influenced future generations. In more recent decades, similar patterns have emerged. When political crises threaten personal safety, money becomes secondary. A prominent businessman in a country facing civil war might transfer his assets to bank accounts abroad and book flights for his family. The scramble can be frantic. Banks may freeze accounts. Governments may impose capital controls. The process of escape is not guaranteed. Some succeed, others are trapped. For those who manage to leave, the challenge is to rebuild elsewhere. They may change their names to avoid attention. They may keep their wealth hidden to protect against hostility toward wealthy refugees. They become invisible by necessity. A contemporary example involves wealthy individuals from countries under strict sanctions. When governments crack down on political dissent, high-profile figures may seek asylum. They may also move their companies offshore. This relocation can strip wealth from the local economy, leaving workers without jobs. It can also create new economic centers abroad. Entire industries have relocated due to instability at home. These shifts illustrate how closely wealth is tied to political conditions. When stability breaks down, fortunes move. Sometimes they vanish entirely. For the people fleeing, wealth can be both a blessing and a burden. It provides resources to escape, but it also attracts attention. Host countries may suspect them of corruption or illegal activity. Media may portray them as symbols of a failing regime. They may face legal battles over assets. At the same time, they may feel guilty about leaving others behind. The psychological toll can be severe. They might long for home but cannot return. They may fear for relatives still in danger. They may worry that the money will run out if they cannot re-establish their businesses. Not all escapes are driven by political oppression. Some are motivated by fear of kidnapping or violence. In regions where crime is rampant, wealthy families may send their children abroad. They may purchase homes in safer countries. These decisions can create a form of disappearance. The family becomes scattered, and the wealth is spread across jurisdictions. They may live under the radar to avoid being targeted. They may adopt modest lifestyles to blend in. They may change their names to avoid detection. Their wealth remains, but their public identity fades. This chapter reminds us that disappearing can be an act of self-protection. It is not always about wrongdoing or mismanagement. Sometimes it is about the simple desire to live without fear. For audiences in stable societies, these stories might seem distant, but they highlight how fragile our sense of security can be. A change in political leadership, a civil war, or a wave of violence can overturn lives overnight. Wealth can help, but it does not guarantee safety. Displacement and exile are great equalizers. They strip away status and reduce people to their shared need for refuge. As we move forward, our focus shifts again to the power of nature. We will revisit how storms, avalanches, and other forces of the physical world can remove people from the stage. These disappearances are not linked to politics or crime. They are reminders of our smallness in the face of the planet's forces. The paths of escape taken by wealthy individuals often mirror those taken by ordinary refugees. During the fall of Saigon in 1975, families with means rushed to secure seats on departing flights. They carried as much as they could in small suitcases. In the Iranian Revolution of 1979, business owners fled to the United States and Europe, leaving behind factories and homes. In recent years, conflicts in Syria, Venezuela, and Ukraine have forced both rich and poor to leave. While those with money might afford flights and visas, they still face the trauma of exile. They lose networks, language, and a sense of belonging. Historically, diasporas formed by wealthy refugees have shaped economies. Russian immigrants in Paris after 1917 brought art, cuisine, and business acumen. Iranian entrepreneurs in Los Angeles built thriving neighborhoods dubbed terangels. Cuban refugees in Miami revitalized the city's economy. These communities show resilience and adaptability, yet they also carry stories of loss. Many exiles never return home. Their children grow up in new cultures, carrying a dual identity. The fortunes they rebuild are often tied to memories of what was left behind. This connection to the past can inspire generosity or, sometimes, obsessive caution against loss. For those who remain in their home countries, the departure of wealthy families can be a double-edged sword. On one hand, it can reduce inequality. On the other, it can slow economic growth and reduce investment. Factories may close, jobs disappear, communities lose patrons who funded schools and hospitals. Governments may seize abandoned assets or redistribute them. The aftermath can be chaotic. Understanding these dynamics helps us see that the disappearance of the wealthy is not just a personal story, but a societal one. It changes the fabric of economies and neighborhoods. Chapter 12: Storms and Ships Revisited. Nature is an equalizer. It cares little for status or wealth. Earlier we explored the stories of Mike Lynch and Robert Maxwell, two men whose fortunes could not shield them from the sea. In this chapter, we expand our view to consider other ways in which natural forces cause the disappearance of the wealthy. These stories remind us that, despite advances in technology and the comfort money provides, we are still vulnerable to the same dangers our ancestors faced. The sea is one of the most unpredictable natural elements. Yacht owners invest in advanced navigation systems, weather forecasting an experienced crew, yet storms can form quickly. A sudden squall can capsize even a large vessel. Waterspouts, like the one that struck Lynch's yacht, can spin up with little warning. Rogue waves, sometimes twice as high as surrounding waves, can slam into ships. Even on a calm day, a mechanical failure can leave a vessel adrift, at the mercy of currents. When accidents happen far from shore, rescue can be difficult. Time is of the essence. Helicopters and ships may take hours to reach the site. Survival depends on life rafts and the ability to stay calm. Mountains present their own dangers. Weather can shift from sunny to blizzard in minutes. Snow can hide crevasses that are deep enough to swallow a person without trace. High altitudes can cause sickness and disorientation. Even experienced climbers can make fatal mistakes. Carl Van Hobb's disappearance is a stark example, but he is not alone. Each year, climbers and hikers from all walks of life disappear in the mountains. Some bodies are found months or years later when the snow melts. Others remain lost. Families must cope with uncertainty, and communities debate the risks of adventure tourism. The air is another domain where wealth and technology meet nature's power. Private planes and helicopters can offer convenience and privacy, yet they are also subject to weather and mechanical issues. Turbulence can lead to accidents. Visibility can drop unexpectedly. Pilots must make split-second decisions. When something goes wrong, the crash site may be in remote terrain, making rescue and recovery challenging. Wealth may allow a person to own a plane, but it does not guarantee safe passage through the sky. Natural disasters also affect the wealthy. Wildfires have engulfed mansions in California. Floods have swept away homes in Europe. Hurricanes have damaged beachfront properties. While people with resources can rebuild, the experience of losing a home or being forced to evacuate can be traumatizing. It can change their perspective on the importance of material possessions. It can also spark philanthropy. For some, experiencing nature's power leads to a desire to help others who lack insurance or safe places to live. For others, it leads to withdrawal and fear. The relationship between wealth and nature is complex. Wealth can mitigate some risks. It can pay for better equipment, training, and insurance, but it cannot eliminate uncertainty. The natural world is dynamic. Climate change may make weather patterns more unpredictable. Sea levels are rising. Storms may intensify. These changes will affect everyone, rich and poor. The stories of yachts sinking and climbers disappearing foreshadow a future in which more people confront the limits of human control. In reflecting on these stories, we can cultivate respect for nature. We can see adventure not as a conquest, but as a dialogue with the environment. We can prepare better and make decisions that prioritize safety. We can also find humility, whether in a small boat or a superyacht, whether on a local hill or a towering peak. We are all subject to the same physical laws. Recognizing this commonality can foster empathy across social divides. When we hear of a billionaire lost at sea or in the mountains, we can set aside envy and remember that behind the wealth is a person with hopes, fears, and loved ones. Our next chapter turns once again to giving. We will explore how some individuals and families decide to distribute their wealth during their lifetimes, shaping their legacies while still alive. We will consider how these choices influence public perception and what it means to disappear from wealth lists through generosity. Beyond individual accidents, natural disasters can erase wealth on a massive scale. The 2011 tsunami in Japan destroyed entire towns and caused billions in damages. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina flooded New Orleans, damaging homes, businesses, and cultural landmarks. Even those with insurance suffered months or years of disruption. Wildfires in Australia and California have become more frequent, fueled by rising temperatures and drought. These fires do not discriminate. They burn through modest neighborhoods and luxury estates alike. They also release carbon and pollutants that affect global climate. Wealth may allow people to rebuild, but the trauma and loss of irreplaceable items, like family photos or community history, leave lasting scars. Climate change adds urgency to these stories. Scientists warn that storms will become more intense, heat waves more frequent, and sea levels higher. Coastal properties, often owned by the affluent, are at greater risk of flooding and erosion. Some investors are beginning to factor climate risk into their decisions. Coastal cities are investing in sea walls and flood defenses. Insurance companies are recalculating premiums or withdrawing coverage from high-risk areas. The wealthy may adapt by moving or building resilient homes, but not everyone can. the growing divide between those who can afford protection and those who cannot raises ethical questions about fairness and collective responsibility. Preparedness is key. Emergency drills, warning systems, and community support networks can save lives. For individuals with resources, investing in safety measures like reinforced hulls for ships or avalanche training for mountain trips can reduce risk. However, true resilience requires collective action. Governments, businesses, and communities must plan for disasters. They must reduce greenhouse gas emissions, restore ecosystems, and ensure that infrastructure is strong. Recognizing the interconnectedness of our environment and economy can inspire cooperative approaches. The stories of storms and accidents remind us that we are all passengers on the same planet. Our fates are linked. Chapter 13, Giving It All Away. In Chapter 7, we met Chuck Feeney, the quiet philanthropist who gave away his fortune. He is not alone in believing that wealth should be used to improve lives. Around the world, some individuals and families choose to distribute their wealth during their lifetimes rather than leave it to heirs or let it accumulate. This chapter explores the philosophy and practice of giving while living and how it leads to a different kind of disappearance, the vanishing of wealth by choice. The idea of giving away large sums has ancient roots. Religions and cultures around the world encourage charity. In modern times, philanthropy has taken new forms. Foundations are established with missions ranging from education and health to climate change and social justice. The Giving Pledge, launched by Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, invites billionaires to commit to donating most of their wealth. Many have signed, each with personal motivations. Some want to tackle specific problems, such as eradicating diseases or expanding access to technology. Others feel a moral obligation to address inequality. For them, wealth is a means to an end, not an end itself. When wealthy people decide to give away their fortunes, they often face criticism along with praise. Supporters argue that private philanthropy can fill gaps left by governments. Donors can fund innovative projects quickly. They can take risks that public institutions cannot. Critics worry that private wealth can distort priorities. A billionaire's personal interests may not align with community needs. There is also concern about accountability. Foundations are not elected. Their decisions can shape policy. Some argue that taxing wealth and funding public programs is fairer. Yet in societies where public funding is limited, philanthropy can make a real difference. Beyond the debate over impact is the personal transformation that giving can bring. For some donors, writing large checks is easier than letting go of the identity tied to wealth. The process of giving requires confronting what money means. It involves relinquishing control. It can bring satisfaction, but also anxiety about whether the gifts will be used effectively. Donors must trust the organizations they support. They must learn to step back and let others lead. This is a psychological journey. In some cases, donors choose to give anonymously to avoid praise and expectations. This anonymity can feel like a disappearance. They are no longer defined by their wealth. They are free to live quietly while their resources work for others. Families that engage in large-scale philanthropy often involve children in the decision-making process. This can prevent resentment and teach values. It can also create tension if family members disagree on priorities. Some children may want to fund environmental causes, while others focus on education. Negotiating these differences can deepen relationships. It can also expose underlying conflicts. The process can be as much about family dynamics as about money. When successful, it can strengthen bonds and create a shared legacy that transcends individual lives. The act of giving away wealth also influences public perception. Donors who are transparent about their philanthropy can inspire others. They can demonstrate that generosity is possible even at large scales. However, there can be skepticism. People may question whether the giving is sincere or a strategy for tax benefits. They may scrutinize the donor's past actions. The public narrative can shift quickly. A person once criticized for their business practices may be praised for their charitable work. Or a philanthropist may be accused of using donations to distract from other issues. Navigating this landscape requires humility and clarity of purpose. For those who give away their fortunes, the disappearance from wealth lists is a deliberate outcome. They choose to step out of the spotlight. They accept that they will no longer be counted among the richest. They measure success not by net worth but by the projects they support. This shift can be liberating. It can also inspire a reevaluation of what society celebrates. When headlines focus on those who give rather than those who accumulate, cultural values may shift. We may begin to ask different questions, not how much someone is worth, but how they contribute to the common good. As we reflect on giving, we recognize that philanthropy alone cannot solve all problems. It is one tool among many, but it offers a vision of disappearance that is rooted in generosity rather than loss. It shows that stepping away from wealth can be an act of purpose. In the next chapter, we will look at how corporate empires crumble, leaving behind ghostly shells of once-powerful brands and the people who led them. These stories of collapse will bring us back to the theme of fragility in the world of money. In addition to large-scale philanthropy, there is a growing movement of community-led giving. Mutual aid networks, often organized by volunteers, provide support during crises. Neighbors share food, childcare, and transportation. These efforts are not driven by billionaires, but by ordinary people who recognize the value of solidarity. During the COVID-19 pandemic, mutual aid groups delivered groceries to elderly neighbors and raised funds for families who lost income. In many communities, small donors contribute to local foundations that fund scholarships or health care. These acts of generosity may not make headlines, but they strengthen social fabric. Another trend is participatory grant-making. In this approach, the people who are intended to benefit from the funds play a role in deciding how they are used. For example, a foundation supporting youth programs might include young people in its decision-making panels. This shifts power from donors to recipients. It can lead to more equitable and effective distribution of resources. It also challenges traditional philanthropy's top-down model. As participatory methods grow, the definition of giving evolves. Wealth becomes a resource to be shared in collaboration rather than bestowed from above. Finally, conversations about philanthropy are increasingly linked to discussions about systemic change. Some argue that charity alone cannot address structural inequality. They call for reforms such as progressive taxation, living wages, and public investment in education. They view philanthropy as a supplement to, not a substitute for, systemic solutions. This perspective does not diminish the value of giving. Instead, it situates it within a broader framework. Wealthy donors can support policy advocacy, fund research, and amplify voices calling for justice. In doing so, they use their resources to challenge the systems that allowed extreme wealth to accumulate in the first place. This approach aligns with the idea that disappearing from the rich list can be part of a strategy for social transformation. Chapter 14: When Empires Crumble. Earlier we looked at individual collapses like Robert Maxwell's media empire and the fall of Quadriga CX. In this chapter, we explore the broader phenomenon of corporate empires that crumble, taking fortunes and reputations with them. These collapses can result from excessive debt, poor management, changing markets, or regulatory interventions. They leave behind empty offices, unfinished projects, and questions about what could have been done differently. The story of Evergrande, one of China's largest property developers, is a prime example. Founded in the 1990s, Evergrande expanded rapidly, borrowing heavily to finance its projects. The company built apartments, malls, theme parks, and even electric cars. Its founder, Hui Ka-yan, became one of the richest men in China. Millions bought homes from Evergrande. Suppliers depended on the company's contracts. Investors trusted its bonds, but the growth masked vulnerabilities. Evergrande's liabilities ballooned to around $300 billion. When China's government tightened rules on borrowing and signaled that it wanted to curb speculation in real estate, the company's cash flow dried up. Construction slowed. Payments to contractors were delayed. Homebuyers worried that they would never receive their apartments. Evergrande's struggles had a cascading effect. The company's stock price plummeted. Creditors demanded repayment. The government stepped in to manage the process, fearing that a sudden collapse could shock the economy. For Hui Ka-yan, the personal consequences were severe. He faced investigations and restrictions on his movements. His fortune shrank. The empire he built became a cautionary tale. It showed the danger of using massive leverage to fuel growth. It also showed the risk of relying on a market model subject to policy shifts. Other corporate collapses follow similar patterns. Companies in industries like retail, energy, and technology have expanded too quickly, taken on too much debt, or failed to adapt to new competitors. The downfall of a major company affects more than shareholders. Workers lose jobs, suppliers lose contracts, and communities lose tax revenue. When a business is a household name, its failure can feel like a personal loss to customers. Consider the decline of long-standing department stores in many countries. Shoppers who remember buying clothes as children see the stores close. They feel nostalgia and sadness. At the same time, new companies rise to take their place, illustrating the constant churn of capitalism. Sometimes corporate collapses involve fraud. Executives may falsify earnings to meet expectations. They may mislead regulators and investors. When the truth comes out, the company's value evaporates. Employees and investors are left with little recourse. Legal proceedings may recover some funds, but the damage is done. The reputation of the founder or CEO is tarnished. They may face criminal charges. The trust that once existed between the company and the public is broken. Regulation plays a key role in preventing collapses. Governments set rules to ensure that companies maintain adequate capital, disclose accurate information, and treat customers fairly. However, regulations can be imperfect. They may lag behind innovations. They may be influenced by powerful interests. When regulators do act, they may do so unevenly. In some cases, as with Evergrande, swift intervention can prevent a total collapse. In others, inaction or lenient oversight can allow problems to grow. The interplay between corporate ambition and regulatory frameworks is a delicate balance. For individuals who build or invest in companies, the risk of collapse is a reminder to diversify and to stay grounded. It is easy to believe that a successful enterprise will continue to grow. It is tempting to ignore warning signs, but as history shows, even giants can fall. The emotional impact on founders can be profound. They may feel responsible for the losses others suffer. They may struggle with guilt or shame. The collapse of a company is not just a financial event, it is also a personal and social one. As we conclude this chapter, we see that the crumbling of empires is part of a larger cycle. Rise and fall are natural in economies. What matters is how we respond. Do we learn from mistakes? Do we create systems that protect people? Do we hold leaders accountable? These questions echo as we prepare for the final chapter, where we will reflect on the themes of this series and consider what disappearing billionaires can teach us about the human condition. The early 2000s and the global financial crisis of 2008 provide more examples of corporate empires crumbling. Lehman Brothers, a storied investment bank founded in the 19th century, filed for bankruptcy in 2008 after suffering huge losses on mortgage-backed securities. Its collapse contributed to a cascade that plunged the world into recession. Thousands of employees lost their jobs overnight. Savings and retirement accounts were wiped out. Governments spent billions to stabilize the economy. The fall of Lehman Brothers showed that even institutions considered too big to fail could vanish. It prompted reforms in banking regulation and spurred debate about executive compensation and risk management. Enron's collapse in 2001, mentioned earlier, had similar elements. Once admired for its innovation in energy trading, Enron used complex financial structures to hide debt. When the deception was exposed, the company imploded. Employees lost pensions. Investors lost billions. The scandal led to the dissolution of Arthur Andersen, one of the world's largest accounting firms. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act was passed to strengthen corporate governance. These events show that corporate collapses are not isolated. They influence laws, careers, and public trust. They also highlight the role of gatekeepers like auditors, rating agencies, and regulators. When these gatekeepers fail, the damage can be enormous. On a smaller scale, local businesses can crumble due to mismanagement or changing conditions. A restaurant may expand too quickly and be unable to meet demand. A manufacturer may rely on a single supplier that suddenly raises prices. These collapses may not make international headlines, but they are devastating for employees and owners. They remind us that economic vulnerability is not confined to the giants. Preparing for uncertainty, diversifying investments, and seeking advice can help mitigate risks. Learning from both large and small collapses can lead to healthier economic practices. Chapter 15, In the Shadows of Money. We have traveled across oceans, climbed mountains, explored courtrooms, and stepped into family living rooms. We have met people who lost their wealth in storms, gave it away freely, watched it vanish due to fraud, or saw it evaporate under political pressure. We have looked at lists that measure fortunes and at the spaces between the lines. We have learned that money, while powerful, is not a shield against the forces of nature, the law, politics, family dynamics, or the passage of time. In this final chapter, we reflect on what these stories reveal about the human experience and the meaning of wealth. One of the most striking lessons is the fragility of fortune. Whether held in bricks and mortar, digital code, or paper shares, wealth can change form or disappear quickly. The collapse of Evergrande's business model, the sinking of a yacht, all show that even large fortunes have weak points. This fragility invites humility. It suggests that no one is truly immune to loss. Recognizing this can foster empathy. When we see a headline about a billionaire facing trouble, we can remember that behind the number is a human life, with joys and sorrows similar to our own. Another theme is the interdependence of wealth and society. Money is not created in isolation. It arises from interactions with workers, consumers, governments, and communities. When fortunes disappear, the effects ripple outward. Employees lose jobs when companies collapse. Retirees lose savings when pension funds are misused. Citizens lose trust when public funds are stolen. Conversely, communities gain when wealth is shared, as in the philanthropy of Chuck Feeney. Understanding this interdependence can guide how we think about responsibility. Wealth brings influence, and with influence comes a duty to act ethically. We also see that power can make people vulnerable. Hui Ka-Yan's company grew enormous, but it also drew scrutiny. Jho Low gained access to high society, but he now lives in hiding. Robert Maxwell amassed influence, yet his empire's collapse exposed his misdeeds. Power invites attention from regulators, competitors, and critics. It can create isolation. The pressure to maintain a certain image can lead to risky decisions. Recognizing the vulnerability that accompanies power can humanize those we see as untouchable. It can also warn aspiring leaders to seek balance. Freedom is another thread. Some people disappear from wealth lists to find freedom from public scrutiny, like Chuck Feeney. Others flee to avoid prosecution, like Jho Low. Some vanish because they seek freedom from family expectations or political control. Yet freedom is not absolute. People may feel liberated when they give away money, but they still face aging and mortality. Those who escape justice live in fear of being caught. Those who hide from political systems may still be subject to other forms of control. The search for freedom within the shadow of money is complex and ongoing. The role of narratives cannot be overlooked. Stories shape how we perceive disappearing billionaires. Media coverage can cast someone as a villain or a hero. Public opinion can swing between admiration and outrage. Rumors can spread when information is scarce, as in the case of Karl Aravan Hobbs' disappearance. Narratives influence policy. They affect market behavior. They shape personal reputations. Being aware of this helps us approach such stories with critical thinking. We can seek multiple sources, recognize biases, and hold space for ambiguity. Perhaps the deepest lesson is about the nature of value. Money is a measure, but it is not the only measure. A wealthy person's life can be empty if relationships are shallow. An act of generosity can create more value than a large bank account. A company that treats workers well contributes more to society than one that merely maximizes profit. When we look at disappearing billionaires, we see that value lies not only in accumulation but in use. Wealth used to build schools, fund research, or protect the environment has lasting impact. Wealth used to prop up a hollow empire may vanish without a trace. As we come to the end of this journey, we invite you to carry these reflections into your own life. You may not have a fortune to lose, but you have resources and influence. You have the ability to decide how you measure success. You have the opportunity to build relationships and communities that provide support when other structures crumble. You can practice humility by recognizing how quickly circumstances can change. You can show empathy by understanding that behind every headline is a human story. Money will continue to flow through our world. People will rise to wealth and fall from it. Empires will be built and dismantled. New technologies will create new fortunes and new risks. Political systems will shift. Amid these changes, the human stories remain. They connect us across time and place. They remind us that, whether rich or poor, we all navigate uncertainty. We all seek meaning. We all want to leave a legacy that matters. The shadows of money can hide and reveal. They can conceal wrongdoing and obscure generosity. They can distort perceptions and invite curiosity. By shining a light on the stories of disappearing billionaires, we hope to see not only the fate of fortunes, but also the choices and circumstances that shape lives. In doing so, we gain insight into our own relationship with wealth. We learn that disappearance is not always a tragedy or a scandal. It can be a choice, a consequence, or a calling. What matters is how we respond, learn, and grow. As we ponder these lessons, we might ask ourselves what kind of legacy we wish to leave. Legacy is not limited to a bank account or a building with our name on it. It includes the impact we have on others and the values we embody. A humble life can radiate generosity. A small act of kindness can ripple outward. Even if our resources are limited, we can contribute time, attention, and care. We can support our communities and stand up for fairness. In a world obsessed with the accumulation of wealth, choosing to measure success differently is a radical act. It challenges norms and invites others to reflect. We might also consider how to prepare for the unexpected. The stories we have heard caution us to build resilience. This does not mean living in fear, but rather cultivating adaptability. It means saving for emergencies, diversifying our skills, and staying informed about the world. It means nurturing relationships so that when crises come, we have a support network. It also means advocating for systems that protect the most vulnerable. When disasters strike, having robust public safety nets can prevent tragedies. These are practical ways to honor the lessons of disappearing fortunes. Finally, we can embrace curiosity and critical thinking. The headlines that capture our attention often simplify complex stories. By digging deeper, we find nuance. We learn that individuals can be both flawed and admirable. We see that systems shape outcomes as much as personal choices. We recognize our biases and expand our perspectives. This curiosity makes us better citizens and more compassionate neighbors. It allows us to engage with the world thoughtfully, resisting the temptation to judge quickly or to envy blindly. The shadows of money will always be part of human society. They will cast intrigue and raise questions. By walking through them together, with an open heart and a reflective mind, we can discover wisdom. We can see that behind each disappearing billionaire is a collection of choices, circumstances, and social forces. We can choose to learn from them, to build a fairer, more resilient world, and to find meaning beyond the numbers. Thank you for joining this journey. As the final words settle, it is natural to wonder what comes next. The world of wealth will continue to evolve. New industries will emerge, and with them new fortunes. Artificial intelligence, space exploration, and green technologies may create the next wave of billionaires. Alongside them will come new challenges, such as ethical questions about automation, environmental sustainability, and the fair distribution of resources. Some of these future billionaires may learn from the stories we have shared, choosing to build more resilient, transparent, and inclusive enterprises. Others may repeat past mistakes, drawn by the same temptations of power and prestige. For storytellers and historians, the subject of disappearing billionaires will remain fertile ground. Each new disappearance will prompt comparisons to those we have examined here. Researchers will trace money trails, ask who benefited and who suffered, and seek patterns that might prevent future harm. Filmmakers and writers will dramatize the human elements, turning complex financial events into stories that resonate with audiences. Educators will use these cases as teaching tools, helping students understand economics, ethics, and law. In this way, the stories of vanished fortunes will continue to serve a purpose beyond entertainment. For all of us, the journey through these stories can be a catalyst for introspection. It invites us to question our own relationship with money. It encourages us to discuss wealth openly, without shame or envy. It inspires conversations about how to balance ambition with compassion, security with generosity. It may even prompt practical steps, such as writing a will, supporting a cause we care about, or reaching out to mend a family rift. These small actions connect us to the larger themes of the series. They remind us that while we may not control global markets or political systems, we do control how we use what we have. In making those choices, we define our own legacy and contribute to the stories that will be told about our time. And thus the story continues, weaving through time and lives.